In this video, I'm going to be discussing this article, a recent article. Actually, man, it goes back the 24th of March. As you can see, the headline: New York corrections officers not allowed to wear masks. Yes, New York corrections officers not allowed to wear masks. I haven't read the article, so we're going to read it together. Corrections officers in New York will not be allowed to wear or bring in their own mask to work, according to the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. Bring in their own mask. I don't know, are they saying that they can't bring in any, or if they can only bring in masks that are issued? Let's proceed. Corrections officers can and do wear a mask when appropriate to the medical situation. There is a department directive that outlines what can be worn with the uniform. The masks are not allowed unless medically necessary for the job and area they work in, and then will be provided to them. Okay, that could be kind of subjective, especially in a time where we're dealing with a pandemic, with the threat of coronavirus, COVID-19. So would that, and with there being so much discussion on social distancing, it's hard to social distance in a prison or jail setting. Let me tell you, for those of you who haven't been on the inside, it's hard to social distance. So if you take that into consideration, you would think that would be, if based on the wording, that would be appropriate, because of the fact that you come in so much intimate contact with each other, just based on the setup of most prison or many prison and jail systems. Anyway, the New York State Department of Health and CDC do not recommend that the general public use face masks to protect themselves during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this article goes back a few days, and I know things have changed a bit since then. They're actually recommending that people wear masks while you're out in public. So I'm not sure if this article has been updated, or the policy is updated, or things have changed since then. I think I'll probably do a little research after I get done with this video. Rather, people are encouraged to wash their hands regularly and use hand sanitizers if water and soap are not available. DOCCS also say that internal transfers of incarcerated individuals has been stopped except for medical, disciplinary, and other exigent circumstances. Exigent meaning emergency, basically, to ensure the continued health and safety of our staff and incarcerated population. Visitation to several local jails and state prisons has been restricted during the health crisis. Now, I'm not sure if this is the same facility, but I can recall reading and seeing an article where there was a statement saying that, I'm not sure if it was in New York or California, one of those places, because, I mean, you can pretty much guess that whenever you hear some foolishness going on when it comes to the law enforcement, the legal system, it's probably California or New York. Now, that's not always the case, but nowadays it is a lot. But there was a statement, an article or something that I read, which said that the staff couldn't wear masks because masks made the inmates afraid. Yeah, it made the inmates afraid. Inmates locked up in prison, jail. But an officer wearing a mask would make them afraid. So the masks, the health and safety of the officer is of little importance in comparison to how these inmates feel. Welcome to the 21st century, and in particularly everything nowadays is all about how you feel, folks. Everything. It's all about how people feel. I've had some conversations lately with some people that I would typically believed to be rational people, but so many people are bought into this whole mindset, and it's all about feelings. Their argument completely falls apart when you look at it from a logical perspective, because the basis of it is, and people will open themselves up to the most foolish and ridiculous concepts and ideas because it may make someone feel uncomfortable or feel bad. But that's where we are. That's where we have moved to in our society. And again, officers being there's health, safety, well-being being pushed aside. It's where we are at, folks. It's where we are, sadly. In this article, crisis gives fake cops an opening to exploit. Let me tell you something, folks. Whenever there's a crisis or a difficult time or any type of challenging time, there's always someone there ready and willing to take advantage. Always. And here's a prime example. Police impersonators with funny badges and flashing blue lights are taking advantage of quarantine rules to defraud or harass people across the country, the authorities warn. In Lodi, California, a man wearing a quote-unquote tactical type vest stopped a man in a park and told him he was violating curfew and needed to hand over $1,000 or go to jail. Now, I hope most people have more sense than to realize that a cop isn't going to ask you to hand over $1,000 or go to jail unless they believe, if you believe all cops are corrupt, then yeah, you probably buy into it. And I know that there's some out there cops who probably would do something like that. And they definitely don't belong on the force. But I would hope more people are more rational and logical than that would call into question and demand the supervisor. And that can halt everything. Potentially. I mean, unless you have a criminal who threatens you with a gun and all that kind of stuff, then you have to, compliance in most cases may be the safest route to go. And then you deal with it later. In Erie, Colorado, a man with flashing lights in his car pulled over a woman driving to work and told her she was violating a stay-at-home order. He followed her back to her house and then drove off. And that could be creepy, especially if you're a woman. In Jackson County, Georgia, a man with a blue light on his dashboard who was sporting a pin-on badge pulled over the driver of a dump truck, identified himself as a deputy sheriff, and told the driver to get off the road because he was a non-essential employee. Now, this sounds like somebody who might just be crazy enough, and believe me, I'm not justifying this, but someone who might be crazy. Some people thrive for that attention. They thrive for that power to be in a situation where you can tell people what to do. And there's some people who are crazy enough to think they might actually be doing a good thing. Across the country, police impersonators are exploiting the restrictions imposed during the coronavirus pandemic to conduct illegal traffic stops. And I can recall there have been times where things like that have taken place here. I think last year there was one guy who was making multiple stops. Thank God he got caught. Some have harassed women and others have tried to steal money or personal information, according to law enforcement officials. So please be aware of what's going on, folks. Know the police vehicle identifying markers in your town. What type of vehicles do they typically drive? Ask for some form of identification. And if you feel really unsafe, ask for a supervisor. Ask for a supervisor. Especially if you're really concerned about whether this person is legitimate or not. There are wannabe police officers, and the coronavirus is making it easier for them to do it, said Janice Mangum, the sheriff in Jackson County. They're up to no good, and it bothers me a lot. In many cases, the perpetrators are preying on the vulnerability and the fear people feel as a result as the virus continues to spread rapidly, said Marcus Felsen, a professor of criminal justice at Texas State University. I argue strongly for opportunity being the driving force to crime, and this is a crime of opportunity, which basically goes along with what I said initially. Academic research has also indicated that the increasing regulation of civilian life and greater police powers, like those enacted after the September 11th terrorist attack, made it easier for police impersonators to operate. The more we regulate, the more opportunity it opens for people who want to capitalize on it for their own selfish purposes. And that's also something to think of. When you give up your freedoms, there are things we often open our doors to, open ourselves up to. Said Robert Galately, a historian at Florida State University who has written about police impersonators in Nazi Germany. It's disgusting. In some cases, where drivers were allowed to leave after being stopped briefly, there appears to have been no clear motive other than the desire to wield power, like I said, wield the power of the badge for personal satisfaction, the police said. In Jackson County, for example, the man who identified himself as a deputy let the driver of the dump truck go without asking for his ID or demanding any money. So, let me read this real quick, and I'll wrap it up. A 2012 study of 56 incidents of police impersonation found that perpetrators fell into 3 general categories. Many were common crooks looking for a quick shakedown. A few were cop wannabes attracted to the authority and ego of policing, and several were driven by quote-unquote uncommon compulsions, impersonating officers to engage in sexual misconduct. I'm not surprised by that either. The recommendations by the police. It says the police recommend that drivers should call 911 if they fear they've been stopped by a bogus law enforcement officer, because dispatchers can determine if the stop is legitimate. They also recommend stopping in a well-lit public area and turning on the hazard lights to draw the attention of passing motorists. Drivers can also ask to see a badge or an identification card. So we'll leave it at that, folks. Like I said, this was a New York Times article, and you can check it out if you want more information on it. But I totally concur and agree with those ideas, those safety precautions. It's best to be careful out there, folks. No one's saying don't stop, but because you could be dealing with a legitimate police officer, but stop within those parameters that were mentioned, and it should help you. And if need be, call 911. Ask for ID. Do those things that can help keep you safe. I hope that helps. In the meantime, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation. Later.